Hello, everyone. This is Gene from NYC, and I want you all to say it with me. 3, 2, 1. Mortal Kombat! I can't help it. I have to do that. I have to. But actually, I did want to discuss MK a little bit, and comments made by the art director at Netherrealm Studios, Steve Beran, I believe his name is, about the costume changes specifically to the female characters. Now, I know that Leanna Kay covered this, and I will admit I'm sort of inspired to cover it because of her video on it, but I wanted to take this time to express some of my own thoughts, because while I have left comments on her videos, I just thought, let me take my own platform and sort of discuss some of the other issues I have with Steve Beran's approach and the comments he made. So, if you don't know, one of the more notable aspects of MK11 is its art design, and in particular how a lot of the female characters have been, some would say, needlessly covered up, some would say desexualized. And Steve Beran pretty much confirmed this in a Polygon article. The Polygon article itself is actually talking about how Ed Boon comes up with the fatalities for the games, but as the article goes on, it goes to the changed art direction, and Steve Beran confirms that they did change the costumes for many of the characters, for many of the female characters, right, and made them a little more, I guess in his opinion, sensible. His justifications being that the series is trying to move in a more mature and respectful direction as regards the depiction of female characters, and in particular he tries to use real world reasoning, saying that, well, if you're in a real fight for your life, you're not going to be wearing a bikini. Here's the issues that I have with his comments and just the approach that he, and by extension Netherrealm Studios, or as I like to call them, Midway Games. I'm from the old school, so I'm always going to remember them as Midway Games. So while I'm talking, I may slip and call them Midway, so just to get that out of the way, if I say Midway, I mean Netherrealm Studios. To me, it's one and the same thing. But my issues with what he said are a fewfold, and I've covered some of my issues with my comments on Leanna Kay's video, but I also thought maybe I would just try to better elaborate on them here. It's in no particular order, but here are some of the issues I have. First of all, and here's probably one of the biggest ones I have. I feel that when it becomes socially unacceptable to portray characters, male or female, as sexy, as alluring, as attractive, as desirable, you are now stifling creative freedom, creative expression, and cool designs. You have to remember that video games are a visual medium. Anybody who plays video games on the regular, right, wants a visual feast. As much as we want gameplay and a good story and good controls, we also want, memorable music, and we want memorable visuals. Not just in the graphics, themselves, because graphics and graphic quality is always changing. Like, I'm from the old school. I remember when 8-bit graphics were the standard. I remember when 32-bit graphics were the height of realism. So it's not just the graphical power, but it's also artistic direction. Most people who play video games want a game that looks good, right? However, looking good is defined by the game. For example, looking good for Street Fighter is going to be very different for looking good for Tekken, which is going to be very different for looking good for King of Fighters, Mortal Kombat, so on and so on and so forth. Excuse me. Right, but gamers want games that look good, that are visually appealing, that are visually distinctive. And in my estimation, when you start making the depiction of sexy characters a crime, when you make it a social ill, when you make it a bad thing, you are now stifling creativity because you are now taking a particular look away, right? And my approach is, if you can't make a character look sexy, then you can't make them look innocent either, right? If you can't play to the senses, if you can't make them look sensual or sexy or whatever it is, which again is going to be subjective. There are certainly plenty of types of sensuality and sexy looks. You know, a person can look sexy standing naked, and a person can look sexy fully clothed. I'm sure in our lives, most of us, if not all of us, have seen both, right? Because sex appeal is is subjective, and B, it actually encompasses many different things. It isn't just, you know, the size of one's arms or one's breast or curves or anything of that nature. It's actually a multi-pronged thing, right? It's an onion. It has many levels. But still, my point in all this is that when you don't, when it becomes objectionable, just across the board, right, to depict especially female characters as sexy, you now make it hard to depict them as anything else, in my estimation. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying that every female character in Mortal Kombat should look sexy. Just as I'm not saying that every character in Mortal Kombat should look homely or plain. I think that the character's looks, and I've always said this, be it in word or be it in speech, that the way any character looks should be based in, principally, character design and visual narrative. I should be able to get an idea of who this character is, by looking at them. And the looks should be memorable. If you ask me to describe Liu Kang, I should be able to tell you distinctive features about him. Like, for example, he tends to wear a red headband. You know, if you ask me distinctive qualities about Jax, I should be able to tell you that he has steel arms. Right? I should be able to mention certain things that are associated with that character and that character only. I'll use another one, Nightwolf. I should be able to tell you that he wears war paint because he's Native American. There should be a distinctness, a uniqueness to every character, in my personal estimation, right? Whether it's the fact that Kintaro looks like a tiger who got turned into a Shokan, or whether it's the fact that, you know, Goro, you know, wears these tiny underwear. There should be something distinct about each character design, and it should play into the visual narrative of the characters. You know how I know Raiden uses electricity as an attack? Because the man literally radiates electricity, right? It pours off his body. It, you know, flashes in his eyes. It flashes in that dang stick he's always carrying. So if I know nothing else about Raiden, I'm going to know, oh, okay, he's the electricity guy, right? He's going to use electricity as special attacks. I will know at least that much. So there's that, right? So I do think that some characters should look sexy, and some characters should not. For example, typically, I don't think Sonya needs an over-sexualized look. Her whole theme as a character is that she's the resident tough girl, she's military, she's a mom now. So I do think a less sexy. And again, that does not mean that she has to look bad, right? I'm not saying she needs to look bad, but a costume where she's a bit more covered up, I do think is appropriate. Though I do think that the costume they have her in for MK11 does make her look a little too plain. No character in a fantasy fighting game, even if they are meant to be a little more real world, should ever look plain. For example, Midway did this way back in 1995 when they introduced Stryker. Stryker was originally like a riot cop, and he looked like one, right? He looked like a slightly pudgy, you know, a policeman. No one liked him. Players didn't really take to him. right? Although he did have some pretty cool special moves that were cheap as all hell. Damn gun and those grenades, I still hate him. But when he was redesigned for the reboot, and even prior to that, I think in the later games in the series, like Deception and Armageddon, right? He was given a much more muscular look. He was given a basically he looked more like a guy who was working, say, in SWAT than he did as a riot cop. You know why? Because the SWAT look visually was better. It was more engaging. It made him look tougher than, being a basically a beat cop, with a small belly. And the whole thing about Stryker is that he's supposed to be a everyman character. You really can't have an everyman character in a game like Mortal Kombat. Which leads me to the next point. Steve Beran said in the Polygon article that their approach to the female characters and to the female costumes, their costumes and their character designs, was that it was supposed to be more mature and more realistic, and that if you're really going to fight for your life, you're not going to, come to the fight in a skimpy bikini. I'm probably not quoting him exactly, but that was generally his the points to his character. Or rather, sorry, the points to his statement. Here's the problem I have with that. That's a perfectly fine reasoning if we're talking about a game like, say, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six or the Call of Duty series. That's fine for those type of games because, yes, those games are supposed to be much more realistic, much more real world, and having a character like Jade, in that type of setting would, of course, just totally break immersion. But this is Mortal Kombat. It is a fantasy fighting game. It is a fantasy fighting game that has its roots in B-movie kung fu flicks that was inspired by Enter the Dragon. Play the very first Mortal Kombat game. It is Enter the Dragon as a fighting game. From the 70s kung fu stylings of the music and the beginning, it's not really a cinematic, but I guess image, right, with the red background and the golden dragons and the words Mortal Kombat being written out in gold. Okay, the game was inspired by, at least back in the day, by kitsch B kung fu movie tropes, and then it was combined with the edgy boy 90s tropes that were popular at the time. With all due respect to Steve Beran and Ed Boon and everybody else who had a say in the creative and art direction of this game, it is too late to all of a sudden play the "we want to grow up" card. The whole appeal of the series, from its release in 1992 to today, is the fact that it is this very immature fighting game. Okay? And that's not bad. That's the appeal of it. It is this very kitsch, over-the-top game, right? It's like Street Fighter on steroids. In fact, the whole idea of the fatality came, and I remember Ed Boon saying this in an interview years ago, came from Street Fighter. They were basically playing, to my understanding, they were playing Street Fighter one day. Someone, got dizzy. And the idea basically was, what if we took the dizzy physics of Street Fighter, put them at the end of the fight, and then allowed you to gruesomely kill your opponent in a ridiculously over-the-top way? And the fatalities were born. Mortal Kombat as a franchise and as a video game is all about being edgy boy and being immature. Nobody plays Mortal Kombat because they want, this deep, mature, thoughtful experience. No, you play it because you want good, bloody fun. That's why anybody plays Mortal Kombat. Now, some play more for the characters, some play more for the lore. I will admit, when I did play the games regularly, it was mainly because I am a lore freak. That and I love Sub-Zero and Shiva, and I love seeing them in every game. Speaking of which, bring back Shiva. Shiva needs more love. Anyway. But that's why people play the game. This is like playing a GTA game and expecting it to be a thoughtful examination of, you know, why certain men fall into violent lifestyles. No. Nobody plays GTA for that, and nobody plays Mortal Kombat for thoughtfulness or maturity. It's too little, too late to all of a sudden try to grow up now. Right? So there's that. Then there's the, well, you wouldn't go to a real fight dressed in a skimpy outfit. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't go to a real fight. But if we look at people who do fight for a living, such as boxers, MMA fighters, pro wrestlers, yes, pro wrestling, because pro wrestling actually does have a lot in common with video games in general, and also because it is, granted, while it's a stylized fight, real fights on occasion do break out. And they are using, again, you know, martial arts. A lot of the martial arts moves you see in a wrestling ring are real moves. They're just applied in a manner that is ideally supposed to not injure somebody. Although pro wrestlers are always going to get injured because, again, they are putting on a show, a very violent one. So, again, while people are not probably going to wear a bikini to a fight, they will wear tight pants. They will wear halter tops, crop tops. Well, not halter top, a crop top, shorts, right? Because having less clothing on your body, right, is actually less restrictive. First of all, it makes it hard to grab onto somebody, right? And number two, less clothing means that you are less restricted. If you want to play the realism game, okay, that's how it works. People who fight for a living, who are basically sport fighters, right? Again, MMA, boxers, pro wrestling, so on and so forth. They dress the way they do not to titillate the fans, right? But to give themselves a fighting chance, right? To allow their bodies to, you know, breathe and to move and to not have anything to grab on. And these are people who are putting their lives and their bodies and their health on the line. Because if you think about it, if you're going into a situation where you know that someone's going to hit you in the face with all they've got and you're expected to do the same, you are putting your life at risk. It's not necessarily intentionally a death match, but people have been known to die in the ring. So yes, you're probably not going to wear a bikini, but you probably will at least wear shorts, right? But again, more importantly, Mortal Kombat is a fantasy fighter. But if you're going to try to use the you wouldn't show skin argument, which is really what he's trying to do here, you are wrong. You are objectively, factually wrong. Professional fighters show skin all the time. And that's something else I want to touch upon briefly. The showing of skin and why professional fighters show skin. Okay, first of all, the showing of skin, especially in a fight, can actually be quite intimidating, right? You have to be pretty set and pretty confident in your abilities as a fighter to basically leave your upper body, you know, open and pretty much say, here are my most vital areas, come at me. But more importantly, from a visual standpoint, right, especially for the upper body, right, especially for a man, for example, a person's arms, a person's chest, right, if those areas of the body are well developed and very large, it's going to make somebody look intimidating. This is why not bodyguards, bouncers, for example, at clubs, will typically wear a black shirt, right, a black short sleeve shirt, and stand with their arms crossed over their chest. It's a very intimidating image, especially if the man is very big, which typically for bouncers they will be. But going back to MMA and boxing, why do you think MMA fighters and boxers of both genders, for example, will mug to the camera or they'll mug to the crowd and flex, do the classic double bicep pose. It's because they are trying to look strong and intimidating. So they are trying to make themselves look as powerful as they can. And the best way to look powerful, especially in that type of environment, which is basically sport combat and spectacle, which again is in many ways what Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and other fighting games are, right? They're trying to look strong. The visuals are very important in boxing and MMA and pro wrestling. Right? Triple H looks a lot more intimidating when he's coming to the ring in his little shorts, because you can see his legs, because you can see his arms, you can see his full chest. He looks a lot scarier during his entrance to the ring than he does, say, when he's standing in the ring in full clothing. Because guess what? His body is covered at that point. You can still tell he's a big man, right? But it's just different. It's just incredibly different between when you see someone in a suit and their body's covered up, or in t-shirt and jeans and their body's covered up, and then when they're coming to the fight, basically, right, in the little bit that they're gonna wear, right, where you can see how large and how muscular their arms are, or how large and how muscular their legs are, or how tight their abs are, right? Visual display is as much a part of fighting and intimidation and psychology as feints and, whiffed punches and kicks or anything else is. It's as much a part of the mind games of it all. Looking scary, looking intimidating, right, is a big factor. And you're probably going to look scary and intimidating actually when you're showing more skin and not less. So there's all that. And also real talk for a moment. I know I'm just rambling and going on 100 different directions, but I would love for Steve Beran and Ed Boon and others to go tell MMA fighters, right, that what they wear is inappropriate. Go tell Ronda Rousey that what she wore as an MMA fighter was inappropriate. Go tell Amanda Nunes that what she wears as a MMA fighter is inappropriate. Go tell Layla Ali that what she wore as a pro boxer was inappropriate. If you want to go into pro wrestling, tell Asuka, right, who was trained in Joshi wrestling, which if you're not familiar with pro wrestling, is freaking hard and freaking dangerous. Like, Japanese wrestling it looks like the stiffest, most violent stuff you'll ever see that was not backyard wrestling or ECW or things of that nature. Japanese wrestling for both sexes is absolutely vicious, and the Japanese audience expects you to be tough. If you can't hang, get the hell out. That's why Japanese wrestlers, especially the female ones, right, have such a great respect both in their homeland and just in wrestling in general, because anybody who follows wrestling closely knows just how tough it is. So I want Ed Boon and Steve Beran and others to go approach these women and tell them that what they're wearing for their job, for their work, to put on a show for a paying audience is inappropriate. Go ahead. Go ahead and walk up to their faces and tell them that. I'll give you, I will not ever say another word about the visuals of Mortal Kombat if either one of them do that. Actually walk up to the face of any of these women and tell them that what they wear to entertain a crowd and to do their job is inappropriate. So there's that. Well, another thing is, at least to me, is that Steve Beran seems to forget that, just like with pro wrestling and MMA and boxing and whatnot, is that video games are supposed to, and I think I already touched on this, but I'll say it again, video games are a visual medium, right? The visuals are very important, right? And then it goes back to visual narrative, right? The characters should look the way that they should look. Sonya should look the way Sonya Blade should look. She shouldn't look like Kitana. She shouldn't look like Jade. She shouldn't look like Scarlet. She shouldn't look like Shiva. Right? She should look like Sonya. and only Sonia. When you say that you cannot depict a character as sexy, then I don't know how else to say it. Maybe I've already said it and the phone is ringing. But anyway, so I think I've covered everything that I wanted to say. I know this got kind of rambly, and it's about 25 minutes in. So I think that's it for now. I think I've gotten my points across, at least I hope I have. So I hope you all have a good day. All right, other videos shall be coming up soon. I just wanted to sort of get things off my chest and elaborate on that. Bye.